Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux taking a look at race number 5 at Del Mar on Saturday. Let's throw up the field for the $100,000 Del Mar Juvenile Fillies Turf. We're going 1 mile on the turf. 2-year-old fillies, it's a big field. The two thought process figures to take a lot of money because she was no secret in her turf debut, her second lifetime start, and she won as she pleased.
When I look at this field, I don't see a situation where she's not favored, Dan, just knowing that her number was so huge last time out. I do think horses like Super Speed will take some play in here. I just think the way that thought process really took a huge step forward, getting on the grass, stretching out around 2 turns, really says a lot about her. And I think the betting public is going to support her heavily in this spot.
But there's a little bit of everything in this race as we throw up the Timeform US pace projector. A couple of horses being imported from Europe, several stretch-out sprinters, a horse trying turf for the first time from the Baffert barn, the 5 Cassalou. One of those stretch-out sprinters is the 7 Super Speed, who sat just off the leader, grinded her way home in the manner of a filly that might appreciate the distance. She looks pretty quick, and if she gets to the front and this pace isn't too quick, I would expect her to be around near the wire.
Yeah, whether she can win or not, that's a different question, right? But I just think looking at her debut and how she did it, I don't think she'll have any problem if she finds herself having to sit for some reason, right? Or if she's forward, can she relax on the front end? She was fine with the target in front of her last time out. And when you look at this group, obviously a lot of them either come out of a mile turf race or a 5 ace. And then you have the question mark with 2 horses coming over from Europe. You really don't know what's going to happen in their first start and how they're going to perform and what sort of speed they will show. But with just several turf sprinters being in here and now stretching out, I do think we'll see a quick pace.
Timeform US believes it's quick as well in the 2 thought process. Note the LP flag over her chiclet. She has the fastest Timeform US late pace rating. We'll start things off with the 1, Madonna of Loreto, who was no match for Super Speed in the career debut. But just watching that race, she to me looks like a filly that might appreciate a little bit more ground. And she draws an advantageous inside post position. I think a good trip could be coming, although she is a maiden taking on some nice winners.
She is, but I think the thing that you said is maybe the distance is what's going to help her here. And I felt like in the sprint, she was just an even 4th throughout. She really didn't lose ground. She didn't make up ground. And I agree with you. I think that when you see that sort of performance from a filly or a colt, a 2-year-old, you just think that they're probably begging for more ground. So she's going to get it here. Phil D'Amato, when it comes to stakes races in California on the grass, I just feel like that is his niche, right? He has very, good numbers across the board, but when I think about turf stakes races, I think of Phil D'Amato. I think he really places his horses in the right spot. So if she were to pop here for Little Red Feather and graduate in a stake, I wouldn't be shocked. I think if you're going to back her here, you're going to get a ton of value on her. I'd go in a different direction, but I can see that there's a selling point to be made on her.
Thought process, the number 2 ran okay sprinting on dirt in her debut, beaten by a filly that'll be in the Del Mar debutante on the Saturday program, but she really took to turf. Here's her second race where she settled just off the leaders, made a bid on the outside, a little bit green with her lead changes in the stretch, but she's much the best. 81 Beyer speed figure. That Beyer, if she repeats, is going to be real tough for these others to match. And her most recent workout, I got to look at that bullet work. She worked with D'Amato's Lucky Girl, who we'll see a little bit later on in the grade 2, maybe a nice older mare.
Yeah, this is a really nice filly from what we saw. I thought her debut was okay. And you look at the name there, Proud Starlet, who will race in the previous race at this day at Del Mar, right? We'll see her in race 4 on Saturday. But to me, thought process, the big thing is how easy she won, but the trip that she got early. I just wonder if in a situation like this with where she's drawn down, does she just get the perfect trip once again? She's already shown that she has an affinity for the grass, likes the distance. To me, she's really hard to look outside of that, just knowing that she was able to put in a really game performance on the 17th of August.
From Ireland comes the number 3, and Sherdub, who's now with trainer Mark Ladd after pulling off a big stunner at 33-1 in her career debut in Ireland. I thought she ran pretty well that day. She settled just off the pace, got to the outside, and showed off a nice turn of foot to win. The 11th place horse came back to win. You've got 4 other horses in that race that came back to place, so maybe she faced a pretty good group.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough task, right? Just coming to the States for the first time, you never know what to expect. And I feel like the uncertainty is even more with a 2-year-old filly who last raced at the end of July. She really hasn't been stateside that long to get acclimated and to adjust to things over here. But Mark Lott, in general, does well with his new acquisitions. A small sampling, though, for horses when they make their first start in North America. And like you said, she faced a big field last time. She was able to do it. And obviously these new connections that, purchased her, they have some faith in her. I just find it tough. There's not a ton to go with. It's going to be the case for the other Euro in this spot. What do you make out of those performances? It's just very different here in the U.S. And I just wish with both of them, we would have had them either here longer or just another start, and that start be stateside.
Her local turf work looked pretty good. Glad had her in with one of Phil D'Amato's older stakes winners, Magical Musical Rhapsody, and she hung in there pretty well. But as Ashley says, this is a pretty tough spot, and she hasn't had a ton of time to acclimate. The 4 is Fondest Dream, making her first start for Richard Baltas. She won a live race in England, beat 4 next out winners, and the runner-ups won 3 of her next 4, so it looked like a pretty good group. Now she's got to stretch all the way out, first time North America.
So I think the thing that works against her, right, is she has to stretch out. But that race is back in April. She's had a ton of time here. Look at the workouts. She's had a lot of chances to train specifically over the Del Mar turf course. And she had a really nice drill on August 25th and more of, to me, probably a maintenance work on the 1st of September. If I had to pick between them, while she is stretching out considerably in distance compared to the other Euro, I like, Dan, that she has the time here to kind of get acclimated in her workouts. To me, there's plenty of them, and they're quite strong.
Do you think it's a good sign that the 5 Kasalu's going to the turf this early in her career for Baffert, a debut winner in gate-to-wire fashion, then third in a graded stakes race, the Sorrento behind Nooney? Fine, you don't want to face Nooney in the stablemate and the Del Mar debutante, but you think that maybe Baffert would find another dirt race for Kasalu. They're going to try turf here. The Dam won on the turf. She's foaled 1 turf winner. I guess there's some pedigree.
I don't know what to make out of her at all. I think the big thing is if she's going to go long here on the turf, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a trainer, but I would have thought to go long on the dirt first and maybe try to find a group where, obviously she has early foot, right? She really tried to press the pace last time out. She tired. You mentioned who wins that Nooney, her stablemate, Vaca with the twist. We'll both see them in race 4. I don't know. And to me, Baffert on the turf, if there's things to like, you're going to get a better price than you would, say, on the dirt. But the turf stats really aren't there for the outfit. So especially at a short price, I couldn't use Kasalu. I think if you've mentioned the pedigree's there and there's things that you like about her, maybe she's worth a look at the right price. But for me, in terms of, say, the top 2 spots, I really couldn't use her.
Global Consort, the number 6, well beaten in her first 2 starts at long odds, but they asked a lot out of her last time out, stretching out 3 furlongs and switching to turf. I just didn't really see much of an excuse other than that. They backed down the pace when she was on the lead, and she just couldn't kick with a couple of these in the stretch. Simply has to do more.
It really needs to do more. And I think the thing is, we've talked about another maiden in the field in the form of the 1 horse here on the rail. The figure is just very strong compared to these 2 figures from this runner. So you wonder what's going to happen here from a pace perspective. If she's going to try to be forward. She's been forward in both of those races, whether sprinting on the dirt, going long on the turf, but she just hasn't been a factor in the final stages, and they're not doing anything different, right? We're not changing the rider. We're not changing equipment, nothing like that. So it's tough to me to picture a situation where she takes a huge step forward.
Super Speed looked good in her career debut sprinting for John Sadler. Let's watch that 5/8 of a mile dash. Super Speed was chasing in second and very briefly looks like she might be outpaced by the horse on the lead. I like this last 3/16 of a mile because she shows no quit and she grinds this down like maybe she wants more distance, and why not? She's by a Triple Crown winner out of a mare by a Triple Crown winner.
And the horse that she passes here in those final stages ends up graduating in her next start. So I think that's a flattering note to make. And to me, I have no issues with this one stretching out in distance. I think it's just going to be what sort of trip she gets. We saw on the pace projector, she's projected to maybe be the pace setter in here. That could certainly be true just coming out of the 5/8 race. I just don't know if she'll necessarily be lonely on the lead. We'll have to see what others decide to do in here. But a very nice debut for the John Sadler barn.
Third start off a 2-month layoff for the 8 Apocalyptic, who was no match for Thought Process last time out. All in all, settled into a pretty good position. The pace was solid, but she just couldn't run with Thought Process at the end. Another filly that's just going to have to probably run a lifetime best.
I will say, even though her margin of defeat was still pretty big last time out, I do think she raced better with the blinkers on. She was at least a little bit more forward early. Thought Process she'll have to tackle again was just a dominant winner there. But I think she took a step forward, at least in that third career start. And I think we can attribute that to the blinkers on. And I think in terms of where she'll trip in here, maybe she'll be 4th or 5th early, kind of trying to get into a rhythm. And maybe she'll try to close late. But so far in her career, we haven't seen that late punch.
This race will be far from a layup for the 9 Caitlin Fever, but she finished ahead of 4 of these in her turf debut, second time out, stretching all the way out. Pace wasn't very fast. I thought it was a relaxed trip, but I do like to see horses show improved speed second time out. To me, it's a sign of added maturation. They're figuring the game out. Maybe this one can surprise.
Yeah, this would be an interesting horse to maybe consider here, depending if she goes here or goes into a race the day before at Del Mar. She's cross-entered. To me, I think in terms of the trip last time out, she was game throughout, even though the winner was able to close from off of it and get the job done. For this filly to at least stick around and to, be pretty much clear for second, I thought it was a good effort. She'll be a big price in here. If I were to use her, I'd be looking at, say, the bottom of the exotics. But, well, it's such a tough group, Dan, when we look at it. I mean, this is a big field. Her figures, they're a little soft as well.
Hey Little Lady was one of the fillies that finished behind Caitlin Fever last time out. Like Caitlin Fever, switching surfaces, stretching out in distance. I thought she earned a good tactical trip there and just really couldn't punch with Caitlin Fever. So I'm going to need to see a little bit more before I endorse her to at least outfinish that one again and then face some tough ones as well.
And you'll see she has another time in the barn now of Bob Hesh Jr.'s had a good meet. It was an even performance. I think when we look at her and we look at Caitlin Fever, I would pick Caitlin Fever in the spot out of those two, right? Just looking at their performances. I thought this filly was a little even in the end, but this will be your second time going long on the turf. Maybe there's some upside there. Not much to go by works. When you look at her works in Kentucky, she's a little bit on the quicker side towards the end of them, and I feel like her works in California, they're a tad slower.
Not great post positions for our final 2 entrants, but I think there's something with both the 11 Twirling Light, the 12C Runner. Let's start with Twirling Light, who took a little bit of money in her career debut, going 5/8 of a mile, didn't have the best trip in the world, and the third place finisher came back to beat Calabreds with a 60 buyer. She's bred to get a mile. If this pace is hot, maybe she can sort of tuck in, hopefully avoid being hung out too wide on the first turn and come with a kick.
In the case of Twirling Light, the horse that finished in front of her, Tequila and Therapy, was able to win over Pacific Classic weekend at Del Mar and able to graduate. I think considering she was dead last and had to pass some horses and didn't have the cleanest of trips, she could certainly take a step forward. Again, another case here of now a horse doing something different for the second time, stretching out in distance. But Peter Miller, in terms of his statistics, he is more known for having horses ready to go in their second career outing compared to their first. The stat is day and night difference. I think he's 7-8% with firsters, maiden second time out, 23%. So if the light bulb goes on in this spot, I don't think it will be a complete shocker. Maybe it's a little bit of a tough task against stakes competition, but she could certainly take a big stride forward.
And while the 12C Runner finished behind Caitlin Fever when the beaten favorite in her career debut, Caitlin Fever had the experience edge going into that race. It's never easy to debut going 2 turns. And I think Caitlin Fever had a better setup being up close to slow pace while C Runner tried to rally into it. I think there's something here with her, but she is going to have to overcome a very difficult post position.
Yeah, and Tim Yachteen, I feel like with the 2-year-olds is someone to watch. I think the numbers 13%. I think it's a light number. It's not necessarily heavy or light, I should say, but it's kind of middle of the road. And I think when you look at some of his 2-year-olds, he's some very talented horses in the barn, and I'm sure they're excited about next year. Sea Runner, I don't think I did anything wrong on debut. I think when we talk about the other horses, the question will be stretching out. At least she's tried this once, and she ran respectably. I think, the outside draw, I'm not sure if I love it for her, but she should be tactical enough where she can save some ground. And, the mile trip worked out fine for her last time.
Let's take a look at our top picks for the Del Mar Juvenile Fillies Turf, one of 3 stakes on the card on Saturday. We're both going with the same exacta thought process, super speed. They've run the best races on turf thus far.
I can't look outside of thought process. I mean, I just feel like the first try going a mile on the turf was really eye-catching. Visually, the way she won, the trip that she got, I just think she could get that same exact trip here, and I think that's the winning trip. I think there's going to be horses such as Super Speed who could muddle things early, could still be around in the end, but I just think in that stalking trip just off the pace, thought process looks very tough.
Yeah, I agree, but I want to use the 1 Madonna of Loretto somewhere as well if she gets into this race. She's also cross-entered on the AE list earlier in the week. I do think the extra distance is going to help, and I really think this inside post helps with a short run to the first turn. 273.12 for Ashley, 275.1 for me in the Del Mar Juvenile Fillies Turf. Best of luck.